Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Mondays Down South. We are recording from, well, I guess Evan's in the same location, but I am recording from Austin, Texas. And it's funny enough because I'm here and Zach is not, although this was one of his prior homes. And unfortunately, he can't join us today on the show. But my reason for coming to Austin is I came here for a fantasy football draft. And that's very apropos, if you will, because today we are doing a fantasy football episode where Evan and I will run you through a 12-team, half PPR, one flex, standard setting mock draft. And the goal here is for Evan and I to try to come to a consensus. We both have multiple drafts coming up. We know all of you guys are in draft season. I know most drafts are happening this week and next week. So it'll be really fun for us to just kind of go through this dynamic. To all the people that are in leagues with us, you're welcome for insider information on our picks. And to all the people who are watching or anyone who's ever reached out to us for fantasy advice, hopefully this will give you a little bit of an intel into how we're approaching our drafts and give you a little bit of a background view of what we think. So we're really excited about this. We've been talking about doing fantasy football segments. It's been on our list forever, and here we are. So E, if you got anything you want to tee up, you're going to be the screen share, so I'm going to let you do it.
Yeah, no, good setup. My shout out will be I am from the same location, but burning on fumes here after an awesome weekend celebrating a friend group wedding. Lindsay now Murphy. So shout out the Murphys on that, and had lots of great Mondays Down South discourse at this wedding. Lots of people shouting us out, and I think I had two people come up to me asking for fantasy advice, one of which was happening during the wedding. So I don't know what that was.
Good.
Yeah, so lots of good discourse, and shout out everyone there that's supporting the channel and supporting what we're doing. But yeah, looking forward to this topic. I think my first redraft is Wednesday, and this might shock people, but this is going to be my first even, I think, mock draft because I was so focused on Dynasty. So, maybe you should take my advice with a grain of salt based on that, or maybe I shouldn't have said that at all because as we are about to do a mock draft podcast. But yeah, if no further ado, I'll share the board and get into it. Maybe while I do that, side, do you want to give people kind of the specs of what we set up here?
Yeah, I'll jump in. So first and foremost, you're not giving yourself enough credit because you may not be doing a bunch of mock drafts because you've been very up to date on player information and you text me all the time being like, this guy's a sleeper and such. So Evan is definitely on top of his players and where they are. The other thing to keep in mind is for the lack of mock drafts Evan's had, I promise I've more than made up for it. I must be, you guys might think I'm insane, but I might be in the triple digits now just with how many sleeper drafts I do before I go to bed at night or, just throughout the day. So whenever I get a break. So it's something I love to do. It's something I really enjoy. So it'll be really fun. But yeah, we're using the sleeper format. One pro tip, obviously, for people who are new to fantasy football, not all formats are going to have their player rankings the same. So that's one thing to consider as you think about what your approach to drafting is. Make sure you think about your own rankings and think about who you like at different spots. One of the beautiful things is I tend to like sleepers rankings more than others. So you might have a guy in sleeper that's ranked a little bit higher, and then you might go draft in Yahoo, and that guy might be available around later. So make sure you form your strategies accordingly for anyone that is doing different formats. It's very important to look at the players in advance. Make sure you know where they are. I think I mentioned earlier it's 12-team, half PPR, one flex, and then the rest of the positions are standard. So that's one quarterback, two wide receivers, two running backs, and a tight end. And the goal here is we have pick number 6. So we're just going to run the mock. And the way Sleeper works is it's just going to randomize picks for the computer, and their AI tends to do a good job. So you get, pretty standard picks across the board, which you might expect in a regular draft. And then at our pick at 6, Evan and I are going to debate who we think we should take every round and try to build the best possible team we can drafting from the middle of the round. And yeah, I'll give a little bit more of a talk after the draft. But if anyone watches this, has any questions, needs any fantasy consultation, hit up Evan or hit up your fantasy football guy, Cy. Trademark from Holden Maccabee from the H Mac show. So shout out to him. And yeah, that's enough of yapping. Ev, if you're ready, let's get to it.
Let's do it. And I guess the interesting thing about the sleeper rankings, right, is it's actually ADP of folks that have drafted as opposed to some like expert rankings. Is that right?
Yep, they definitely account for that. I don't think it's a rankings based thing at all, but
Right.
I don't know if they account for all mock drafts or
Yeah.
just standard or like real drafts. So that's one
I
thing to keep
assume,
in
yeah.
mind.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
assume it's
if
real
it's
drafts,
mock
but
drafts, people are going to do a little bit more crazy things, so you don't want to account for that too much. Yeah.
all right. I'm
All
gonna hit
right.
resume here and we'll see the first 5 picks. Ooh, Bijan it. Yeah, Bijan it too. So before we jump into our pick, who's your 1-1, Cy? Is there any question for you?
I don't think there's any question for me. I'm going
Yep.
C-Mac only
Yep.
because um, I just don't know how you pick against them. I know people are
Yep.
a little bit concerned about some injury news or whatever, but it's nothing major from everything we understand. I don't think you go against easily the best fantasy asset in fantasy football last year and multiple years. It's just I'm not picking against that. You on the
Yep.
same boat, Evan?
Yeah, I have C-Mac slam dunk. I mean, the kind of the minor injuries may be the biggest concern, but yeah, I can't imagine picking anyone else.
Yeah,
All right.
I think with our pick, we can talk about that a little bit. But one thing that is really interesting about how this board started is in most drafts, in almost every draft, you usually see the top three being C-Mac one, and then you get CD and Tyreek Hill in whatever order for 2, 3. This was
Yep.
interesting. I wouldn't fault anyone for taking Bijan 2 if they did. Maybe in real life they might go here or RB, but that puts us in an interesting spot because generally you would expect Jamar Chase or Bijan to go with pick 4 or 5 ish, and sometimes Justin Jefferson's falling, but in this case he did not. So, Ev, what do you think? How many options do you have here that you're considering?
I would probably be considering 2 guys. The one that I personally am ruling out is Jamar Chase,
Mm-hmm.
mainly because of the contract holdout is a big concern. I do think it'll get done, but he also just has never been able to really put together a full season since that rookie year, whether that be because of his own health or his quarterback's health. So while I love his upside and salivate at that and could even, make an argument for him having the most upside of any of these receivers, I'll leave him out the board here. And then I'd be between Amon-Ra and Brees, who I think could finish RB2 behind McCaffrey, but I would be going Amon-Ra probably in this spot just because I'm obsessed with his floor. I think he's, such a high floor pick in that offense, which hasn't changed really at all year over year with the same quarterback, the same offensive coordinator, even less receiver weapons. Laporta has an injury right now. Gibbs has an injury right now. So I think he'll continue to get fed. My one rule in the first round is you can't win your draft in the first round, but you can lose it with a big mistake. So I'm going to take the safest player on the board for me, which is Amon-Ra St. Brown.
I do love the idea of Amon-Ra. I don't have a problem with that, but I want to make my argument for Brees Hall. Okay, here's the thing. I totally understand the floor of Amon-Ra, and I understand that doesn't mean he lacks upside. He's still capable of being a top 3 to 4 receiver every week. But for me, I want a guy who has a high floor like Amon-Ra, but I want a guy with an astronomical ceiling as well in Brees Hall. And what I love about Brees is even last year on an offense that wasn't very good because of quarterback play, and even with some offensive line injuries and everything of that nature, Brees still managed to be, at least when he was healthy, like a top running back right next to Christian McCaffrey. He had weeks that were arguably more dominant because his upside, he sometimes he just needs one carry to get you a 60-yard touchdown. And he already had an amazing season last year. And you're going into this year with Aaron Rodgers with a better offensive line, with more playmakers to open up holes for him. I love Brees Hall this year in that 5 to 6 to 7 pick. And what I've been doing in a lot of drafts is if I don't have an early pick and I can't get that CD Lamb, Tyreek Hill, if I can get a Bijan or Brees, I usually take them. And the reason I do that is it sets up a bit of a hero RB if I'm able to do that. Because I don't love the guys available in round, let's say the middle of the second round, right? Like you'd end up losing out on guys like Jonathan Taylor, Saquon Barkley, Kyron Williams. All those guys are gone. Maybe you would take a shot on Derrick Henry if he was there, or Devon Achane if you want high upside. But if you can get Brees Hall, your RB1 is set, and then you have more really good receivers available to pick from in the second round. That's my argument. What do you think? Which way you want to go?
Yeah, no, I like. I mean, I love Brees Hall as well here. So I think these are two great options on the board. Like you said, I think he could even push McCaffrey for RB1. I don't know if he'll quite get there, but I think he's gonna have a massive year. Assuming good health on the Jets offense. But like you said, even if they don't get that, I think he'll still have a huge year. So I am, and good call peeking ahead. I like what you're thinking there in terms of availability at the next pick. So let's lock in Brees Hall here. I'm down with that.
Awesome. I appreciate that. Let's see what goes. Let's see what happens after this.
Oh, come on, Ralph falls to 9.
Yeah, he's been going to that anywhere from that 7 to 9 range in most drafts. That's a good split for.
So we did it well here because a lot of these big backs just went off before us. So
yes, sir. That works out great for us though because that left us with some wide receiver options. And of course, on the board we still see Josh Allen, although I won't speak for you. I just don't love going quarterback in the middle of the second round. This is a little bit early for me. Plus, I think there's other high upside guys. So right now, I'll tee this one up, Evan, and then you let me know what you think or make an argument for a guy. I think I think there's one guy more than anyone else that stands out to me, and that's Drake London. I know it's definitely a risky pick, given that he hasn't necessarily shown wide receiver one numbers yet. I know that he hasn't, but if you consider who he's played with in terms of quarterback, and you've considered who he's played with in terms of just coaching around him, he hasn't had the setup that he does right now. And Drake London truly has upside that a lot of other guys going around here don't. And he even has more upside than some of the guys going ahead of him. The concern is the floor. My ideal situation in most drafts, if I get that mid-round pick, is to start with Brees in London if it falls that way. That's what happened for me. But you were willing to, pick Brees for me last time, so I'm going to let you, let me know if there's someone else that you think you would want more.
No, I think that's my pick as well. Middle of the second on Drake London, it feels weird, but like you said, the upside of the clear number one receiver, not many other receiving options there, especially with the Rondale Moore injury. Obviously, Darnell Mooney, it looks like to be penciled in. It's the number 2, and then you have Pitts at tight end. But I'm not fully sold on Drake London being like an elite receiver. But I think the opportunity will be there, and I do think he has enough talent to have a really big year. So, and given the other options on the board, I'm not sure where I would even go. I agree. I'm big on waiting on quarterback. And my next option would maybe even be Debo down there with the Ayuk situation up in the air. But yeah, I think this is confidently Drake London for me. I'm not sure I would.
I agree.
Have a super close second in my book.
I think we'll pick Drake London. And as these picks go, I'll say this: I think there's a tier break there for me for sure. Once we pick London, I think I actually do like Adams and I do like Chris Olave this year as bounce back candidates, but I want that upside of London, so I think there's a tier break. But I do agree with you that Debo might actually be. I could argue for him over those two, especially if Ayuk gets traded.
We almost got him on the way back. Almost
did. All right. So you want to walk people through? Want to walk people through what happened? We had quite a bit of wide receivers go, and had 3 running backs, the high upside A-chain, starting off CeeDee Lamb and Devon A-chain for team 4 at the 4th pick is just absurd. But yeah, I don't know. What do you got? What are you thinking?
Yeah, these second and third rounds I find are tricky. And Laporta's already injured. I would consider that, but I also think tight end is a really deep position this year. So I'm almost, prefer waiting on tight end as well. We just talked about quarterback. So for that reason, I'm not super looking at quarterback here. I do love Nico Collins, but my concern is how are the targets going to shake out from a redraft perspective with Diggs being there now for potentially just this year. Tank Dell's back healthy. They have like multiple tight ends, including Dalton Schultz, who they just extended, and they're still going to want to run the ball. So my favorite receiver on the board is Nico. I think the pick, which I assume you're on board with, is going to be Jalen Waddle for me from a floor standpoint to pair with a high upside Drake London that we drafted in round 2. I think I mentioned this to you offline. I'm not sure if I mentioned it on last week's pod. Waddle has frustrated me last year with his taking tons of plays out of games for his nagging hamstring injuries, and he didn't end up missing many complete games, but yeah, the constant in and out of the field was very frustrating to me, and I think having Hill there limits his upside to be a wide receiver 1, but I think he will confidently be in the wide receiver 2 range, and I think that gives us good value here with what we've done so
Yeah,
far.
I agree. I think his ceiling. I actually think we differ on a ceiling. I think his ceiling's higher
Yep.
than you might think it is, but I do think
Yep.
his floor is one of the highest out of the available people. I think I still would consider Nico here personally because I do think that him and Stroud have a chemistry that is pretty
Yep.
hard to. And if you think about Diggs, he's only there for a year, so I still expect them to establish that long term. But I also like Cooper Cup here as an option, just given it's a redraft league, so I like Cooper Cup for
Right.
that reason because his camp buzz is crazy. Apparently, he's as healthy as he's ever been. If he's anything close to what he was 2 years ago, health wise, there's a real argument for Cooper Cup outproducing Puka, especially because Matt Stafford loves him in the red zone. So that's one thing to think about. One thing I will ask, and this is a pro tip for anyone who's watching this: do you mind scrolling down a little bit to show where our next pick is going to land? Because one thing I want to think about here is who are we going to have available to us around that range and what kind of positions do we like? Because I don't want to get ahead of myself, but one thing I will tell you, Ev, is this year specifically, I actually really favor taking a tight end prior to um, Dalton Kincaid going off the board. So essentially, what I'm saying is, if I can get a tight end by that Dalton Kincaid range, so something in that Trey McBride, Travis Kelsey, even Kyle Pitts, but Drake London's we already have him, so we can't take him. So in that 4 or 5 range, I would really like to take a tight end. So with that in mind, it makes me think hero RB, which makes me think we should definitely go receiver here. It just comes down to which one of those guys you like the most. I'm going to let you make the pick on the receiver. I like all 3 of those guys. And I'm going to let you decide which one you want.
Yeah, Cooper Cup's a good situation. So back to the tight ends, though. I mean, I guess if I look at the board, would you then be looking at reaching a few spots from an ADP standpoint at our next pick? I mean, not to jump ahead of ourselves, or does it make sense to just take Laporta here as the best player according to Sleeper on the board with a few good receivers
I
next time?
actually think the upside of Trey McBride, Dalton
Yep.
Kincaid, and Mark Andrews, and even Travis Kelsey later is higher than actually Kelsey
Yep.
got taken, but those 3 is actually just as high as Laporta, and you can get them around later. I think Laporta is very dependent on touchdowns just because there's so
Yep.
much volume to be had in that offense for Amon-Ra and for even Jameson Williams this year. So with that in mind, I would rather go with one of these receivers because I like them more than who's available next time. So
Yep. Agreed. Laporta had a really unrealistic touchdown
here, yeah.
share, I guess you could say, but
Mhm.
I'm gonna lock in Waddle. I think
Yeah,
with London there gives us
I think that's smart.
safety in that room.
I don't think you can go wrong with either of those 2, so I like that. I like that young receiver core too.
Yep. Ooh, ooh. This would be an
Malik,
interesting one to discuss. I was curious if he would make it
we
there.
do love him. We both love Malik Neighbors. Let's just put that out there for everyone. And the other thing is Malik Neighbors going in the middle of the 4th. I am obsessed with Marvin Harrison Jr. I was obviously a Marvin Harrison Sr. fan as a Colts fan, but it is an absolute blasphemy to me that Marvin Harrison Jr. is going at the end of this or the first pick of the second round in most drafts or second pick of the second round, and you get Malik Neighbors in the middle of the 4th. It's actually crazy. Um, this is tough because when is our next pick? Who's in the range of our next pick?
Yeah, I think we're gonna probably lose the tight ends unless one of them can fall a little bit.
Yeah, we'd have to
You
go
could get
Kittle.
we already got London. Yeah,
Yeah, we don't want to go Pitts. I love Pitts if you don't have Drake London. I'm not trying
right.
to get 2 receivers in the same offense. Um, as much as we love Malik Neighbors, I think we started off really hot with 2 wide receivers, and it is important to me. Here's the strategy that I think is really important. You let me know if you agree, Evan. I think 1Z positions are actually really important this year in drafts. And when I say 1Z, I think you know what that means, but for the general public, I'm referring to quarterback and tight end, where you only start one of them. And the reason I feel that way this year more than most years is I believe people have really overcorrected for running backs and for wide receivers because of last year's injuries to some of those top picks. So I think there's way more depth in those positions to be able to draft them a little bit later in drafts this year than you could last year, which means the way that you get your positional advantage is to get a really good tight end and a really good quarterback. I am more willing to wait on quarterback because there's guys in like the seventh, eighth round that I really like. Tight end wise, after Kyle Pitts, there's not many guys I think that have the upside. I legitimately believe that until Kyle Pitts, any one of those tight ends could finish as the tight end one overall, with the exception of maybe Kittle. I think any one of them could finish as a tight end one overall, and I want that upside.
Yeah. This is a good pick here. I like a lot of guys at the top of this board right now.
Yeah.
Neighbors, just Daniel Jones situation, like that offense is not going to score a lot of touchdowns.
Yeah.
I think Malik is going to get insane volume, but and if you were to go receiver here, which it sounds like isn't where you're leaning, but like picking him over someone like a Devontae Smith, so that I think could have a huge year, is difficult as well. But given he would be our receiver off the board, changes my strategy a little bit, given that we have a pretty good floor already from a receiver group. So I think there's a lot of ways to go. And I love Kenneth Walker too. Obviously, we already drafted Brees, and I'm a proponent of, kind of the more hero RB strategy, like you mentioned earlier. So I wouldn't necessarily go that with what we've done so far, but I do love Kenneth Walker as well.
I don't mind Kenneth Walker if you're doing a different approach, but I also agree with you. I think the way I look at it is if I was willing to take Malik Neighbors, it'd be if I drafted someone like a Devontae Adams in the second or third round, because then I'm taking the high upside receiver paired with like more of your floor receiver. Whereas because we took Drake London, which is a more of an upside pick, if I was to go a second receiver here, then I'd probably consider Neighbors. We have two receivers though, so with that in mind, I think tight end is the pick. The question is, which one do we like the most? I am a massive Trey McBride fan this year, just because even without Kyler, he was great last year. And then once he got Kyler, he was on an 1,100-yard pace with almost double-digit touchdowns. That's pretty, and he's going to get insane volume in that offense. But I would have no problem with Mark Andrews right there as well. So it's up to you in the context of if there's anyone that stands out more to you.
I think if we go tight end, I think McBride would be my guy. Andrews, I could see them starting to lean off him a little bit, given the recent injury history. And Isaiah likely is going to be really involved this year too.
Yeah.
There's only so much pass game volume in that offense to begin with. The buzz out of camp on McBride is amazing paired with what he did last year, all the things you mentioned. So I do like Kincaid a lot as well, but Kincaid for me is more of a floor. I think his ceiling's limited just by how much he's on the field. Although he could have even a tight end, top 3 season. But I'm with you on McBride. I think that's the way we go.
I will say that I do think Kincaid might have a good ceiling. I just can't justify taking him over the two guys ahead of him. Like I have no problem taking him if those two get taken. It's just in the context.
We did get a tight end to make it back to us, so
I can't. I'm willing to bet that in most drafts that's not going to happen though.
Yeah.
But getting Mark Andrews to fall to there, that's not a very likely scenario. So I'm not upset with what we did.
Yep. Tricky spot of the board here. I don't love a lot of the names at the top of the sleeper ADP here. So what are you thinking?
Okay, so I think based on who is available, this seems like a good spot to try to find that third receiver, our flex spot. Nobody's, super jumping out, but I do have a couple of guys who I like as either bounce back candidates or guys with high upside based on their performance last year. Somebody like a Tank Dell is exciting from a high ceiling kind of play. I understand Stephon Diggs went over there, but a lot of people, if you look at the metrics, a lot of people don't understand how insane Tank Dell was once him and CJ Stroud got on the same page. And I think he's got the ability to really boom. So it's someone that I'm strongly considering. If Pittsburgh didn't get Arthur Smith, I might have considered George Pickens, but between all the Ayuk talk and Arthur Smith maybe not being the best coach for passing, he's not my favorite person. So the question here really comes down to, if we scroll up and look at the picks there, I am leaning between someone like a Tank Dell, or I even and to some people, this is a crazy pick. T. Higgins is someone that I really think people are sleeping on this year and aren't even considering because of last year. But Joe Burrow's back, and T. Higgins and Joe Burrow together are pretty darn solid, especially with Tyler Boyd gone from that team. So I don't want to sleep on T. Higgins. I see you pointing at Zay Flowers. If you want to talk on him, you can. I'm a little bit hesitant with Zay Flowers this year just because I don't know if I trust Baltimore to pass the ball enough to support both Mark Andrews and Zay Flowers, at least efficiently.
Yeah, that was just a coincidental hover. I like Zay Flowers the player, but like he's also 5'9", 175. Like that doesn't scream like, big time target and receiver for me. Like you mentioned, we've talked about the offense before, so that caps what would otherwise I think be a high upside player, just given his athleticism. But Tank Dell is such a stud. Yeah, I mean that's going to be such a high volume pass game offense that you can probably sustain 3. T is interesting, especially with the Chase situation. I have a suggestion that's not a receiver. Kyler Murray. If we go grab our quarterback here to pair with our Arizona tight end, I'm not the biggest Matthew Berry fan, but the one thing he always gets right is his ride or die, and his ride or die this year is Kyler Murray. Coming off the injury, like you mentioned with McBride earlier, could have just a massive season and push to be one of the top QBs in fantasy this year. And then at our next pick, I think there's some decent receiver options available potentially.
I don't mind that. Do you feel like it's a reach though? Because I think Kyler might be available with our next pick.
Yeah, but I also think there's comparable receivers that could be there with our next pick as well. So if I was picking a receiver, I'd probably go with Tank just for a little more upside. I would even consider McLaurin here. I think he's in a similar range to some of these other guys.
Are there any running backs here that you like as your RB2?
Not at all, in fact. I don't like Aaron Jones at all. Connor is, I mean, we already drafted McBride. Otherwise, I'd be more. Yeah. Although I've been burned by Connor so many times, but every time he burns me in the first half and then goes off in the second half and gets back on the board. So I think this is a tricky pick, honestly. It's why I'm a little okay with reaching for the quarterback I want quite a bit over the other guys around him. But
yeah, it's funny you say that too, because I think Kyler, I like Anthony Richardson a lot in the 5th round, but then Kyler I'm usually getting in the 6th round, and he's one of my favorite guys. I take him in almost every draft. So I'm glad you said Kyler, because I was going to throw him out for our next pick. I do believe he'll be available with the next pick. But if you want him like really badly to the point where you don't want to risk someone going to get him because there's only one quarterback ahead of him and Joe Burrow, there is a world where, someone might just go get Kyler once they see Joe Burrow gone. And the other thing with mock drafts is you can't, especially with quarterbacks, you can't expect it to go exactly as ADP goes, because in real life, once someone sees a quarterback go, someone else takes a quarterback. So I don't have a problem with that. One thing I will throw out is if we take Kyler here, I'm very keen on keeping an eye out for Rashee Rice in the next round because I think that he is going way too late, especially with the potential of him not getting suspended. I'm okay with this. I'm okay with reaching if you want.
There's a lot of buzz on him actually getting suspended imminently now.
Oh, is there? Okay.
And you see the Chiefs just signed Juju Smith-Schuster, who is awful now, but the fact that they added another receiver to the room, it could just be that they think the other guys in the room are trash, which they are, so that's very possible. But there was a lot of buzz, I think, even today about potentially an imminent suspension. I'm not sure how credible it is, but the guy I kind of like at the next spot, again, not to jump ahead, is Roma Dunze as a high upside third receiver. But I think we can go Tank and then hope Kyler falls to the next pick.
Okay, let's do that. I think you and I might be a little bit different on Rome anyway, though, because I love Roma Dunze. I just worry about the target share in that offense. Like, I think the only one in that offense I currently want is DJ Moore in a redraft league, because I just believe DJ, from everything I'm reading camp reports wise, I think he's just going to continue to get a lot of volume. And then Keenan and Rome and Cole Kmet are going to be fighting over a bunch of receptions after that, but I don't mind that. So let's go Tank.
All right, so I think our plan worked out perfectly here. Kyler's still on the board. Burrow goes a couple picks before. Um, yeah, I think this one's a layup for me.
Yeah, that's a no question. I don't even think we waste time on this. I love Kyler here. I think he's a steal in the 6th round. I am curious, Evan, if we didn't get Kyler here, because one thing I want to always echo for people that are doing fantasy football is to always have a backup plan, because people aren't always going to fall to you the way you want them to. What would you have wanted? Would you have thought maybe we at this point take our second running back? Do you think we take another high upside receiver so we have like some high, we have a high targeted player that we could potentially trade down the road, or is there for always giving us good flex option? Like, what do you think we would have done if Kyler wasn't available?
Yeah, I from a value perspective, I like McLaurin here, but given that um, how does that fit with the rest of our roster? Maybe it's one of those things. Just take the best players at value and figure out that problem later. I
Yep.
mean, Ramondre at this spot, we're planning on going more of a hero RB, but
Yep.
I think that's a pretty significant tier break to some
Yep.
of the rest of the guys. So I would probably
Agreed.
just pick Ramondre. I could argue Dak, maybe a slight reach, but I do like Dak
I do like Dak as
um,
well. Yeah.
a decent bit better than some of the other guys. So maybe I would go there. Or throw more of a dart on receiver, a Xavier Worthy, who I think could use some work, but obviously has massive upside, especially if with Hollywood already out and Rashi potentially getting suspended, or Rome that we just mentioned. So I think there's actually a lot of ways you could go. It just changes the dynamic of the rest of the
I
draft quite
agree.
a bit. Oh,
Yeah, I agree with you. I think I probably would have said let's go Ramondre because of the tier break.
yeah,
But technically in zero R or in hero RB, we could have gone with another receiver, picked a quarterback, and then started hammering our second running back after that. Because the goal with, and I know you know this, but just in general, I think the goal with hero RB is to try to capture some guy late in drafts where you just pick 4 or 5 running backs to kind of finish out,
right.
the 9th round and onwards after you already have your hero, and then you just need one of them to hit, and then hopefully one of them pays off. But in this context, I think I would have done that. The other thing I will say is I do love Dak as well. He's someone I would have considered. But if we had picked Terry McLaurin or Ramondre here, I would have been perfectly fine with Jordan Love being our quarterback in the next round. It's post Jordan Love that I don't love quarterbacks outside of maybe Jaden Daniels is like a deeper sleeper. So anyway,
Yep.
I think we go with Kyler Murray and see what happens.
Yep. Well, I think the board is falling well to us here, sir.
It's working out the way we want it to. It doesn't always, but this is beautiful. We're starting with the Kyler Murray and Trey McBride stack paired with 3 really solid receivers and a potential RB1 overall in fantasy if things play out right. So
Yep.
could be pretty happy with this. Yep.
All right. So the high upside receivers we mentioned are still on the board here in round 7 to us.
Yeah.
From a roster filling perspective, if you wanted to fill out that starting lineup here and get that second RB, Tony Pollard's in an interesting situation.
I like Tony Pollard.
My issue is he didn't look good last year. Period. Now the Cowboys' run blocking has gotten significantly worse from the last few years.
Yeah.
And he's in a true 50-50 with Spears. Like that's pretty much the clearest, I think, committee in the sense of what percentage is going to be the carry share. It's going to be even to start. And I like Tajee Spears a little bit as well. But then you're also in a situation where now that we've established our top 3 running backs, you could take that shot on Rashee Rice, who, if he doesn't get suspended,
I was just going to say that.
gives you a ton of value at this pick. And if he does get suspended, not ideal, but he will be. It's not going to be a season long suspension. I wouldn't think. It might be kind of long, but back for the fantasy playoffs. Stash him until then. So actually, I think there's a good amount of options on the board here. I like.
Yeah, I think I'll say this on the Rashi note: if he and there might be a world where if he does get suspended, it ends up being 4 to 6 games. And even if it was a 4 to 6 game suspension, I actually think this is still a reasonable place to pick him because if if you think about Rashi Rice in the context of where he would have gone in a draft this year if he wasn't there was no suspension at all, right? Like let's say there was no potential suspension, where would he have gone in drafts? I could probably argue that he would have been an early third round pick. That's the kind of upside he has, especially with what he did in the second half of last year as a rookie. He was the wide receiver 9 in fantasy football, even in an offense that wasn't as good. I expect that offense to be better, and from everything I understand, he's been the focal point of that offense. Outside of us, of course, Pacheco, in terms of receivers, and so I still think that he might be a good pick here. And then I actually do like Tony Pollard this year, mainly because I'm hearing from Camp Buzz and everything that he has looked awesome in Tennessee, and part of that is he isn't having to do as much. I actually think that's where Pollard thrives. We saw that back when he was playing with Zeke. I think the issue with the Cowboys last year was they were relying too much on him with a bad line. I do like Pollard. So actually, those are the two guys that stand out to me the most. I do love Calvin Ridley as well this year, but I would rather take Rashi than Calvin, given the fact that we already have 3 starting wide receivers. I want the guy that's going to have league winning potential here over a guy that I think would be a solid flex position. So if we didn't have a third wide receiver, I would argue that we should pick Calvin Ridley maybe, but since we do, I like Rashi. So I'm going to let you decide between Pollard and Rashi.
I think Rashi's my pick here as well. I still think, despite what I mentioned earlier from some of the buzz today, I still think it's above, or it's less than 50% that he gets suspended. Yeah. It just has gone up, I think, a little bit, maybe with some of the moves and whatnot, and the scuttlebutt. So I think this is and like this is amazing value if he doesn't get suspended. I mean, come on. And I'm not.
You're getting a league winning caliber player. Yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah. So that's gonna be where I go.
Good. That looks good.
As we get into this, I like some of the well, maybe more specifically, one of the RBs that'll be available here, even if it's maybe a slight reach. 12 RBs on the board.
I have quite a few RBs at this point that I'm happy with as an RB2 because we have a high upside RB1. We have 4 receivers, so we don't need another receiver. We have an elite tight end, and we have, in my opinion, an elite fantasy quarterback. So at this point, I think we're in a position where we probably want to think about going running back for the next 2 to 3 picks easily, and unless we get somebody crazy at receiver falling to us. I'm curious to see if we have the same opinion of the available running backs. I love guys like Brian Robinson and them available later, but I don't mind a Devin Singletary given the way he finished out last year, and he's going to get all the work in New York. So who was the running back you were looking at that you were thinking about reaching on?
Yeah, I'm on Robinson here, man. I think Robinson is going to have a massive year. I think the fact that Eckler is being taken ahead of him is absolutely insane. If you look at the preseason usage, it's going to be clearly Brian Robinson with Austin Eckler, specifically just a third down back, a little more than a third down back, but and then the red zone. I think the offense is actually going to be decent, like top 20 at least. So there's going to be plenty of touchdowns there. I think people are taking Eckler above him because they associate Cliff Kingsbury's offense with more of a scat back type. But if you look back to his Arizona days, who was the RB during those years? It was James Conner. And I think Brian Robinson's very comparable to James Conner. Just eat up those goal line touchdowns where that offense starts to struggle in the red zone. He's gotten a lot better from a pass catching standpoint as well as what I'm seeing. So Singletary will get a ton of volume. Are the Giants going to be able to block for him, especially when they know the Giants can't throw the ball? I mean, when's the last time the Giants have been able to sustain a steady RB, even when they had Saquon? I mean, and Singletary is a good back, but even though it's a slight reach, I like Brian a lot here.
Yeah, I don't mind the pick, especially because once you get to one of my tips here is once you get to this kind of pick, like if you know you're going to go running back here because you went 0 RB or hero RB in this case, you go with the guy you want, or you go with the guy that's because there is a chance that we don't get Brian Robinson. There's 3 running backs ahead of him. In a regular draft, someone might be like, "Oh, I need a running back." They're going to go get him. So I'm good with that. I like Brian Robinson this year. I agree with you. I think he's got a lot of potential with the way the offense looks. So yeah, let's do it. And we'll see what happens next round.
Yeah,
better than not taking him and ending up in a position where a guy we like more is gone. So yeah, I do want to say though that if we did need another wide receiver, this is a great spot to take another wide receiver for people who need them, because I love taking shots on guys like Christian Watson and Deontay Johnson. Like these guys have a lot of buzz, and even JSN, I don't mind here. I think these guys all have like potential to give you a lot this year in terms of production, and so that's something to keep in mind. If people need wide receiver fours, this is where I take them. Some of these guys won't even start as a flex option.
Yeah, we missed JSN by one pick. Otherwise, I probably would have recommended that one, even though we have four, one of which maybe is just getting suspended.
Yeah.
Um, or Watson. Deontay, I think, will have a big year as well. Um,
Can I give you my running backs here that I like?
Please.
I like I love Chase Brown, and I'm concerned
Oh,
about if we have him available to us or not with the next pick. But I don't want to reach if we could potentially get him later. Um, there's a chance we might, and I know we just reached on Brian Robinson. So the question here is: do we, instead of reaching, if we scroll back up, do we maybe go for the upside of someone like a, let's say, a Trey Benson, who, with how often James Conner gets hurt, he's pretty much, if he gets hurt, there's that potential. I don't like. Well, I'm trying to look at our team again just to make sure. We took Brian Robinson. We did not take Tony Pollard. So with that in mind, Tajay Spears is also an option, but I like Brown more than I like Spears actually. And I think Trey Benson is actually a higher upside play in a world where James Conner might get hurt. And so I kind of liked that, but I'll let you talk on it because I really like that personally.
yeah, I think like you started to allude to a little bit when you go with a hero RB type strategy. I actually think it's important to kind of reach for the guys that you feel pretty confident in.
Yeah.
And obviously you're going to have a handful of them, knowing that they are more of the deeper sleeper category and might not all hit. So I fully support that. I like Chase Brown a lot as well. I was obsessed with him early on in the offseason. I was watching Chase Brown tape from last year in early July or something. I think I texted you guys about, but I'm a little more concerned about him now. Zach Moss is a really good back. He's not going to go anywhere. And then there's also, the chance they add another back to that room. But I do still like Chase Brown a lot. Just a really explosive player. If you wanted to, I don't like Trey Benson all that much, to be honest with you.
Okay.
Early on in camp, it was Jonathan Gannon was pretty critical of him,
Mm-hmm.
specifically from a pass blocking standpoint, which would take him off the field.
Yep.
And now, granted, it would be an ideal spot for someone like him. But it seems like they really like Amari DiMercato even behind Connor, who, didn't look too good last year, but is a really good receiving back. And I think it might take Benson more than a full season to really become fantasy relevant. So
Okay.
I would consider going Brian Thomas here. I love Brian Thomas. He's having, a really, well, it's just a few big catches in the preseason, but they've been huge plays. So that would be maybe someone I would consider as a more of a dart throw. But
Personally,
given
the
our
one thing I
setup,
will.
yep.
Sorry, go ahead, Evan.
No, I was just saying, given our setup, I'm fine with going down to Chase here.
Yeah, the one thing I always think of with Hero RB is I feel that as much as, like, trust me, Jameson Williams would also be someone I'd really look at here if we didn't have to, get that RB depth. But when you go, my number one thing with Hero RB is when I go Hero RB or even zero RB in these rounds, it's so important to take running backs that have the potential to eventually become starters for me because
Yep.
on the off chance one of your starting running backs, whether that's Brees Hall or Brian Robinson, gets hurt, you're putting yourself in a position where you don't have anyone to play and you don't want to be trading one of your great players for less than their value because you're desperate. So that's why it's important for me, at least with the next two out of the next three picks, I think should be running back for us. And I think some of the guys available here are more potential. So out of the remaining running backs, I know you said you aren't a big Trey Benson guy. Who do you feel is your favorite?
I would likely go down to Chase. Yep.
Over instead of just going Tajay here?
Yeah, I could see
Because there could
Tajay
be a
as
world where
well.
we could potentially get Tajay and then have Chase still available to us if we are patient.
Yeah, and
If
in
you do
that case,
scroll down,
I like Corum down there as well.
I
So
like
if you,
Jerome Ford too.
yeah, Ford is kind of a sneaky guy, especially with the news that Chubb is, at least 4 games out, which I think is maybe a little bit more than people originally thought. So,
Yep.
I think there's 3 good options there. So yeah, I'm good with
Yeah.
Spiel. That's what you're thinking.
Let's run Tajay and see who comes available to us. Hopefully, we'll get one of those two, either
Yep.
Jerome Ford or Chase Brown, and then we'll be pretty happy with 2 really solid bench options there.
Nah, they
Oh
took Chase
well, you know
Brown.
what? That's good. It's good. It's good to know. I think sometimes we need scenarios where the guys we want aren't readily available. But
Yep.
we did talk about people we like: Blake Corum, Jerome Ford. I like both of those guys. If you scroll down a little bit, there are some running backs that I think you and I are both. My ideal world, we get one of those two, and then we still get like a J.K. Dobbins or a Rico Dowdle available later.
I'm
If we can
obsessed
get
with both of those guys. I am.
me too. Me too.
JK especially.
Mhm.
Both of them, in fact. I
Yeah,
would.
it's in that order for me too. J.K. first, and then Rico second. I think we're on the same
Yeah,
page with those guys.
yeah.
Yeah,
It's where's our next pick at? Yeah, it's a little early for JK, but
I don't know.
um,
I don't. I was throwing them out there
yeah,
as
for
our
the
next pick.
next.
I don't want
Yeah,
to. I don't want to reach too much when we have the option to get a good
yeah,
running back here. The
yeah.
question is, I lean Jerome Ford just because I know we can start him in the first couple of weeks if we have to. And I think when you're going hero RB, your goal is to get guys you can play early and then work the waivers and trades to go get another good running back as the season progresses. So I like to have guys I can play early, which is why I lean Ford. But I don't have a problem with Corum because, of course, if Kyron were to get hurt, he turns into an RB1 potential. So it really just comes down to how you want to address that.
Yeah, I will say, I think given the backs that we've taken, I
Mm-hmm.
don't think we have an issue by any means of guys we're going to be able to play early.
Yep.
But I think from a redraft perspective, I don't love Corum as much. I love him in general as a player, and I think eventually he'll
Yeah.
be the
Agreed.
guy there. But like Kyron had an amazing year. I think best case scenario, assuming Kyron stays healthy, and the one thing about Kyron is that he's very durable. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Although he did have the nagging hamstring actually, but um, yeah, I think Jerome obviously is a day one, fantasy starter, much less actually the starter for his own team. And I think even when Chubb comes back with Chubb's age, and like Ford's still going to play a good bit,
They're
and
not
could
the
even
each Chubb back in.
yeah,
Agreed.
and so I'm with you on Ford.
Yeah, let's run Jerome Ford. I think that's you just want the guy like the reason I say it is on an off chance, like let's say um, Brian Robinson or Brees Hall were to get hurt. We want someone we can plug immediately. Maybe we'll have that option with those other guys that we pick, but I can't guarantee that Tajay Spears will be doing enough. I can guarantee you Jerome Ford will be doing enough to at least play him. Perfect. Alrighty, and then which pick round? Is this pick 11?
Yep. So I
So
guess I mentioned at the beginning. Yeah.
for people that
Okay.
are still tuning in, we're going to end up doing 12 rounds total. So this
Yeah.
is our last 2 picks, so you got to make them count.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know. Obviously, we've gone several backs recently, but like I mentioned, I think last week even, so I'm not going to reiterate. I love J.K. Dobbins as a high upside play this year.
Agreed.
I think he's their preferred guy out of the gate. Um,
Yep.
Again, you can watch
Agreed.
last week's episode for my full analysis here to save time. And as our 5th running back we have several day one starters on the squad already.
Mhm.
I think this is an ideal spot for someone like J.K.
Yeah, I agree. I would have definitely gone JK here. And then if not, Rico Dowdle and Chuba Hubbard would have been the other 2 I would have considered. But JK Dobbins is who I want, so I'm not going to overthink it. Let's pick him and move on.
Yeah, Chuba Hubbard is a good mention. He was being slept on for me,
Yeah.
as people not realizing that Jonathan Brooks is going to miss, at least I think like 2 or 3, maybe 4 games. He's a
Yep.
rookie anyway. They're going to have to ease him back in off a major injury. And Chuba was good last year, and they really rebuilt that offensive line, and they should be able to throw the ball better. So I
Agreed.
think he's a great guy this range. If you had drafted maybe a different mix of guys earlier, and you needed someone
Agreed.
that's a little more has a little more playable
Agreed.
floor right away, but did I not get it? But yeah, I love
Don't think
Rico Dowdle as well. I think he's probably the back to own for Dallas, but I think
agreed.
Dallas is the most at risk of adding someone else to that room, which is my only worry with him.
They
I think
could. I mean, they're in a position. They're in a position to do it, but I think they would have probably already added someone at this point they may still do it, but they clearly think highly of Rico Dowdle to have not done so thus far. You know what I mean?
Yep. Well, with the camp cuts, a lot of guys become available, like Miles Sanders, may I say, could be available. Not that he's any good, but he would really cut into Dowdle's pass game work. Anyway, um, but all right, last pick of our mock here. Um, just from we got 5 backs, 4 receivers. I'm probably going back to a receiver here.
Yeah,
What are you thinking?
yeah, yeah. We were gonna say Wicks.
No, but I do have
Okay.
someone specific in mind.
Okay. You throw out yours, I'll throw out mine. I do want to do an honorable mention because I know we're going to go receiver. If we didn't just go with a ton of running backs, I love Jalen Wright as one of my last picks in the draft every season now, or in the 12th. I shouldn't say last pick, but in that 12th round range because Jalen Wright.
Yep.
It takes one injury for one of the Miami starters for you to get a dynamic, like not quite A chain level producer, but like a high producer in an offense with a very creative head coach. So I do love Jalen Wright, but we've got a lot of running backs, so I agree. Maybe receivers direction.
Yeah. So for me, it's Jalen Polk.
Okay.
The
Okay.
reason I say this, he's had an amazing camp. He looks like the wide receiver 1 in New England, which doesn't project to be a good pass offense, but is going to be behind most of the season and is going to have to throw. And I also just like his floor, even though he's a rookie. And given that Rashi Rice is a question mark if he does get suspended, maybe you want someone that can actually be somewhat playable early on.
Yeah.
And I think Jalen Polk could be that guy, as a guy that can get a lot of receptions in that offense without. They do have a lot of decent young receivers, which is interesting, but he's the clear top of the pecking order right now. And I like how he mixes in with the rest of our group again, like I mentioned, as someone that could be playable early in the case that Rice is suspended. So I think that's definitely the guy for me.
My only hesitation with Jalen Polk is, uh, well, Drake May looks really good right now. So when Drake May comes in, I'm going to be a little bit more excited about him. I'm a little bit worried about that passing offense until we get Drake May hopefully unleashed at some point. But I do agree that he could be the one, and he could be a great option there. I My other thing though is Demario Douglas. I think is actually someone they really like. So I do worry about him cutting into his volume a little bit. I also wanted to say this is a little bit of a crazier pick, but Ricky Pearsall on the off chance that Brandon Ayuk still gets traded. Kyle Shanahan with the guy that they clearly love, he's got upside there. And then Downs is hurt, but he's another guy there. But actually, the guy I was going to throw out was Dontavian Wicks because he's getting like insane buzz, and it only takes 1 or 2 plays a week for him to really win you the week or at least give you crazy production. So there's just so many guys here, but I'm good with Jalen Polk just for the reasons of a rookie with upside, and maybe him and Drake may find some chemistry. But I'd
Yeah,
be okay with any of them.
I like Pearsall in Dynasty, and I actually had this dilemma of Polk or Pearsall from a dynasty standpoint. And I like Pearsall more in that sense. But even if they trade Ayuk tomorrow, it's not like Pearsall is going to walk in and be the immediate RB or wide receiver 2. He's already injured. Jawan Jennings is someone they really trust, even though he's not that good, but he's a good good in the run game, blocking and all that kind of stuff. And you'd like to think by the end of the year, obviously that Pearsall would be the guy alongside Debo, but I don't think that's a certainty. As someone, really good athlete, but it seems like he might need a little bit of a development. So that's why I like Polk more from a redraft standpoint, but Pearsall more from a dynasty. I like Wicks too, but that just the Green Bay receiver room is wild to me, man. I mean, Jaden Reed, Watson, and the cat. My problem with Cat Buzz is like, you can't talk up. They're talking up all of these guys, which is great, and I think they're all good players. But they can't all get the, a ton of shares. So,
You're right.
yeah. So you on Wicks? I'm on Polk, maybe.
No, let's do. I think we do Polk. I like Polk more than Wicks, given who we have. I think we need.
Yep.
Again, you want to always make this decision based on who you've already drafted. I would have liked Wicks more if we had like a fourth wide receiver as more of a sure thing. But given Rashi's situation, let's go with someone that's got the potential to truly turn into a one on his offense. And we might have to wait for him for a little while, but that's okay. I think that's a fair pick. Yeah. And then
Sounds good.
obviously we're only doing 12 rounds, but in standard leagues, you'd have a couple more rounds. What I would try to do is get like a Darnell Mooney type or someone like that as another receiver after this, simply for the reasons of you want one more receiver that you could potentially start in case the rookie and the um, the injured player were out. You want that extra flex option. So you want to
Yep.
try to find other guys that are more like a Joshua Palmer is your perfect example, like floor guys that could give you like 10 points in your flex spot if you need it. That's important to have.
Yep. Well, I have to say, my friend, I think we drafted a pretty stacked team. That board pretty much fell to us how we wanted, with the exception of maybe that Chase Brown pick. But this is
If you're leaving, do you
pretty
mind
darn
clicking
good
on the
team.
team view? Do you mind clicking on? There's a team view right there. If you leave a draft with this team, good luck to your league mates. I mean, this is, and I'm not just saying that because I'm biased. It's because, like Evan said, we got really lucky with this board falling to us. So this is a beautiful thing.
Yep. All right. I think we've taken up a good chunk of time, so I don't want to delay too much unless you had any other mentions or players.
No, I mean, unless you got a deep sleeper in here somewhere like that, I'm pretty good with this. I think up until the 12th round, this is pretty well set up. But I guess the number one thing I'll say is, as the last minute tip or the last tip I'll give is, it's always important to have multiple guys you like, and then it's also important to not go into draft strategies with a strategy in mind, right? Like if we had gone in saying, oh, we want to do, let's say a hero or zero RB strategy where we don't want to go running back in the first round, then you take yourself out of the potential of taking a guy like Brees Hall. I think you should always form or have mock drafts or ideas in place for when situations fall into place, because we were lucky enough to get Brees Hall and Drake London. But if that doesn't work, sometimes you got to pivot. And I think that's maybe the number one thing I see with people who maybe don't have as much fantasy experience, like committing to one thing. And I think sometimes not taking value where it's available. And I think that's what we did a good job of kind of maneuvering. And then the other thing I'll say is upside versus floor. If you can't just go all upside and you can't just go all floor, because you're setting yourself up for failure one way or the other, I think it's important to balance. And I think that's kind of where the Drake London paired with the Jalen Waddle was a great pick, for example, because you're going high upside with a guy with decent force. So those are the little things that came out of this draft. But I'm really glad we did this because it gives an idea of two different people going through different scenarios. And I'll let you speak on it a little bit, and then after that we can call it.
No, I think I'm good. Yeah, I think this is a really good exercise in terms, kind of a more interesting and interactive way than just doing the classic breakout sleepers bust, which we covered a little bit last week too. So this is the perfect episode to do as redrafts start heating up, and then I guess we'll tease up next week. Next week's going to be our big full season preview. So we're going to go through each of the divisions, pick each division, go through a playoff bracket, pick our Super Bowl and our champion, all that good stuff. So it's going to be a lot of fun. And then the best part of the episode, you'll get the week 1 pick'ems as well next week. I have to say, I've already been looking at spreads even back the last couple of weeks. So excited to get some bets on for week 1, as we're only 2 weeks out, my friend, less than 2 weeks out. So
week and a half,
right around the corner.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yeah. Thank you for doing this, Ev. This was a terrific episode. I don't really have anything else, but looking forward to next week's episode. That's going to be the biggest one of the year, usually for us, the first one and the last one generally. So with that being said, that was Mondays Down South.